Welcome one and all. I am your host, Baba the Storyteller, aka the ubiquitous bard, plagued by an implacable passion for parables, proverbs, and pleasing palaver. I want to welcome you to this story time. If you're coming from one of the other videos, having watched some of the other stories, welcome back. And once again, thank you for honoring this old storyteller, this old griot. If what you're looking at seems very different to you and you've never encountered it, I would encourage you to watch the first video in this series. You'll find it if you search for the story, The Beggar's Bowl of Rice. Now, today's theme, the story that we're going to deal with, is fear. I want to close out this series with this story about fear. And this is an ancient fable, an ancient tale that dates back, thousands of years, I'm sure. Now, the song that I'm playing is called Sagalu, and it's a song dedicated to the brave, to the courageous, and I thought it would be appropriate to play before we go into our story. And before we get to our story, I also want to make sure you take a proverb into the story with you. And then hang around after the story for that segment, something to think about, something to talk about. And then we'll unpack the proverb and discuss a few things about the story that I want you to walk away with, something to think about, something to talk about. So before we get to the story, let me just finish the song for you. And then I'll take you right to the story, I promise. Diara mogomina kute kuyarila na kuyara mogomina numba diarira naro diara mogomina Jaliyaa diara buwala. Jalilumulila Wole wala le, finalu lila, wole waipo, jala de lega wole la, wole wala bamate. Kumate kuna ke ba me kuno, kumate volaina. Kumate kuna ke ba me kuno, kumate volaina. Bulo kumate ke ba me kuno, kumate vola wo ke ba yere. Ye mbara marile hini bulura Jaliyaa la, mere kasila la vini ma. Ye Tumata koyo tumalam, ukume yes unyana le, neo kumata wiyo kumalam, ukume ye jangyana le, mome kumata wiyo kumalam, ukume ye jangyana le, Yeah, mora barile, ini wurura Jaliyaa la, manding sila la vinima. Yeah, The proverb that I want you to take into the story with you. Fear of anything gives it power over you. Enjoy the story of the lion and the lake. And I'll see you after for something to think about, something to talk about. Lion had been king of the jungle longer than anyone could remember. But on this day, all of the animals of the jungle were gathered outside of King Lion's cave, and they were very, very concerned. They were concerned for what they heard coming out of King Lion's cave, something they had never heard before. It was the sound of King Lion crying. Yes, he was crying, and no one had ever heard the king cry before. So all of the animals gathered together, and they elected one among them to go and to speak to King Lion, a representative. Well, obviously, it was none other than Monkey. Monkey approached King Lion's cave, and he yelled out, King Lion, may I come talk to you?" Well, through his tears, King Lion yelled back, "Monkey, what do you want? Why are you here?" Well, Monkey responded, "I'm here representing all of the animals. Everyone wants to know what would make our king cry. May I come in? Will you please talk to me?" Well, King Lion allowed him to come in. And once he was inside, King Lion began to explain exactly what was wrong. King Lion said, "Monkey, I just found out I'm a coward." Well, Monkey was confused because he didn't know what the word coward meant. So he asked King Lion, and King Lion explained, "I'm a coward. I'm a big scaredy cat, Monkey, a big scaredy cat." Well, Monkey was further confused because he thought back over all of the things that King Lion had done in the past, the animals he had saved, those who were hungry that he had fed, the ones he had cared for as their king, and he couldn't understand what would make King Lion afraid. So King Lion explained further. He said, "Monkey, I went down to the lake the other day to get a drink of water, and when I got there was another lion waiting for me. Monkey, he was bigger than me, much taller. His eyes were more piercing, his teeth were longer and sharper. And when I saw him, yes, Monkey asked, what happened? When you saw him, what did you do?" "I turned around and I ran." Well, they sat there in silence for a moment. Monkey could not believe that their king had ever run away from anyone. And then Monkey got a bright idea. He began to explain to King Lion all of the things that he remembered King Lion having done for others. He began to tell King Lion his story about the heroic feats he had done in the past, about the things that had made him king of all of the jungle. Well, the more Monkey talked, the braver King Lion got, until finally King Lion, he leaped up and he ran out of the cave. You know where he was going. Yes, down to the lake. And you know what for? To challenge that other lion. Well, when King Lion got down to the other lake, he looked around. But that other lion was nowhere in sight. When all of a sudden, out of nowhere, the other lion appeared. But this time, that other lion was much, much bigger than King Lion remembered. But King Lion, although his heart was beating really fast, he wanted to turn and run, but he did not. He stared that other lion in his eyes like this. And the other lion stared back. King Lion opened his mouth to roar. And when he did, the other lion opened his mouth to roar. King Lion's heart was beating faster and faster and faster. He felt the fear. He wanted to run, but he did not. He decided he needed to end this. So King Lion stood up on his hind legs and he held his claws out. And when he did, The other lion stood up on his hind legs and held his claws out. So now you have these two lions facing one another. King Lion is not backing down, though. He wants to show why he is king of the jungle. So he leaps at the other lion. And when he does, the other lion leaps at him. So now these two lions are flying toward one another when all of a sudden, King Lion finds himself in the deepest part of the lake, swimming for his life. And King Lion cannot swim so well. He swims and he manages to make it to shore. And when King Lion gets out, he plants himself on the ground and he looks around and he shakes himself off and he figures something out. There never had been another lion. No, there wasn't. When King Lion had gone to the lake to get a drink of water, he had looked into the water, and what he saw looking back at him was not another lion. It was his own reflection. So King Lion had been afraid of who? Himself. Doni doni, kununi beyagada. Welcome back, everyone, and I hope you enjoyed the story of the lion in the lake. It is one of my favorite stories. I think I share that story more than I do any other story when I'm traveling. Now it's time for our segment, Something to Think About, Something to Talk About. But do me a favor, once we get through this segment, please hang around, because afterwards I want to answer a few questions about, well, some of you had wanted to know, who is Baba? So hang around afterwards and we'll talk a little bit about Baba and try to get to know one another a little better. But something to think about, something to talk about. I have three portions to this segment that I want to address. The first is this: fear. What is fear? Now, I imagine fear at one point in our existence as human beings was something very healthy. I mean, could you imagine not being afraid of a lion, a tiger, or a bear? You wouldn't survive very long in the wild, would you? So fear, I imagine, for our ancestors was something very healthy. But I think what's happened over time is fear, well, it becomes not healthy when it gets in the way of you becoming or growing who you need to be, like it did for King Lion. Fear, I think, is a natural part of who we are. And whether we want to admit it or not, and there are a lot of us who will not, all of us possess fear. All of us have been afraid of something. So fear, I think, is a natural part of being who we are as human beings. But there's something that I use with my students. Whenever I'm working with my students, I use this for shock value. And I usually tell them that when you were babies, you were so much more courageous. You were so much more fearless. And this usually gets their attention, especially the younger they are, because they start to imagine what it means to be fearless as a baby. So I usually explain that there's a universal experience that we all have, that we have all had as babies in overcoming fear or being courageous enough. And then I start to explain that as babies, you watched those around you and they did something that made you curious, that made you want to do it. So without hesitation, without even thinking about it, you, as a baby, lifted yourself up on, well, maybe a coffee table, a chair, the side of a sofa, I don't know. But you lifted yourself up and you attempted to take a step. There was nothing in your brain that told you you were not capable. There was nothing in your brain that told you you could not do this. So as a baby, you took that very first step. And what happened? And this is usually when we all start laughing together. Yeah, you fell on your butt. You fell on your butt, but when you fell on your butt, did you sit down and go, I can't do that, and just give up? No. As a baby, you got up and you tried again and again and again and again. And look at you today. You're walking. But you're walking because you were courageous enough to keep trying over and over. You did not let fear of the unknown get in your way. So that's really important to understand, That it's not until we become much older that fear becomes something that's debilitating. It's something that grows within us, just like it grew within King Lion, right? Now, the second thing, the proverb. I want to address the proverb. Fear over anything gives it power over you. I want you guys to gather together with your loved ones, with your friends, family, but I want you to gather together and I want you to put that proverb on the table, and then I want you to begin to discuss it, talk about it. Talk about fear. Talk about what it means. And on a personal level, well, talk about how you've been afraid of something and maybe how you've overcome, right? That's important. It is so important for you to share from who you are in a very authentic way because, look, we are always being watched. We are always being observed. And children will learn so much more from our actions than they will from our words. That's always been true. Now, do not let fear get in the way of you having these discussions. I wanted to put that out. This reminds me of a little story. There was a story of a thief who had been bought before a king. And when he was bought before the king looked at the thief and he said, you have two choices to make. He said, you can either go through that door or you can go to the jail cell. The thief looked over at the door and it was this huge metal, ominous looking door, dark door, metal. The thief put his arms out and said, take me away. So they put him in cuffs and they're taking him away. But as they're taking him away, the thief looks back to the king and he says, well, I'm going to jail anyway, but can you please tell me what is on the other side of that door? And the king says, freedom. And rarely do people choose it. What the king is expressing is that people typically choose what is familiar to them, not what is unknown. The unknown can cause fear for us sometimes, but we cannot let the unknown get in the way of helping us to become who we are meant to be. Most often we have to make the choice of opening that door, even though we don't know what's on the other side of it. But one thing for sure, freedom. Freedom is always a part of facing the unknown. In the story of King Lion, when he faced himself, freedom is what he received. Remember, he had been cloistered in his cave by fear. He wouldn't come out. That's just like that prisoner or the thief choosing the cell. But when he faced himself, well, he was able to come out. So fear over anything gives it power over you. Don't let something that you fear have power over you. Never. And think about this, and I want you to think about this, and I'm going back to the little baby stage. Sometime, somewhere in your life, you may not even think about it anymore. You were afraid of something that you are no longer afraid of. It's true. Take time to think about that. Come up with that story of something that you were afraid of, and then how did you overcome it? Because today you're no longer afraid of it. But when you think about that, when you come up with that, talk about it. Share it with friends, family, loved ones, and then ask them what fears were they able to overcome in their lives. Oh, you will be surprised at the stories that we have to share with one another. And whether you are 3 or 103, we all have stories. That's the human condition, stories. We are story creatures. Final thing in our something to think about, something to talk about segment. The characters in the story. I want you to gather together and I want you to discuss the characters in the story. What role did Monkey play? Think about this. Monkey played a really important, pivotal role in this story. What was it? And listen to one another's opinions on that and respect one another's opinions. Because the whole point of gathering together to listen to our opinions on stories, our perspectives, is not to listen with our ears, but our hearts. Listen with your hearts. And like I said, whether you are 3 or 103, you are bringing a perspective to the table that is of value. Your voice is of value. So what role did Monkey play? And I want to know. So gather together, think about it, talk about it. The other thing, and we always forget about the other players in the story. The animals, all of the animals that were gathered outside of King Lion's cave, what role do they play in the story? That is so important. And I'm going to give you this when you gather to talk about it because it is a significant role. I'm going to give you this when you gather and to talk about and you're thinking about this. The word community. I want you to think about that. The animals formed a community. And how did they contribute to helping King Lion grow? I just thought of something. This is an aside. I didn't mean to bring this in or something to think about, something to talk about. But in the Bambara language, the word for an audience or community is Dembaya. I always keep this in mind because in Bambara, there is no word for audience. There really is no word for just community. Dembaya, translated, means family. Isn't that beautiful? So when there's a gathering of people who come together, they are considered Dembaya, family. Just a quick side note, made me think of that. Oh, and there's one more character. And you may not consider this a character in the story, but I do. And I consider this one of the most valuable characters in the story. The lake. Yes, the lake. What role does the lake play in the story? The lake has a very valuable role. I'm not going to give you any hints. I'm not going to give you my impression or what I think. But I think there are some of you who, well, that light bulb went off in your head and you're like, hey, yeah. Share that epiphany. Share that thought. What role did the lake play? Okay, that's our segment. Something to think about, something to talk about. And I promised you if you hung around a little bit, we would discuss who is this Baba guy? In one of the earlier videos, I had said, you're probably wondering how a child born down south grew up to become a man who travels the world sharing music and stories and educating. And then I told you, well, that's another story for another time. Now is the time. I was not born the fantastic storyteller that you have before you. No. Just like flowers are not born into this life as flowers, and butterflies are not born as butterflies, and, well, swans are not born with the beautiful feathers that they possess. I was not born the storyteller that I have grown into to this day. But I think the important thing, the thing that helped me become who I am is when I was growing up, I spent a lot of time around my elders, around the older people in my family and my community. And at that time, when I was young, I had no idea how valuable that was. Honestly, I didn't know how valuable that was probably until 20, 30 years later. But I spent a lot of time with my elders, specifically one, my great-grandfather. I spent a lot of time around my great-grandfather who lived to be 110 years old. Yes, you heard that right, 110. And my great-grandfather, when I would go visit him, he would share stories. He would talk about, one of the things he loved to talk about more than anything was his mother and father, which would be my great-great-grandmother and my great-great-grandfather. And he would tell me stories about them and about his childhood and growing up. And then he would also talk about his grandmother and grandfather, which would be my great-great-great-grandmother and great-great-great-grandfather. Do you know what a gift that is for a child? To be able to take in the words of their elders and to have them with them throughout their life. That's one of the things that has helped me on my journey, those stories that I heard growing up. And I've attempted in my life to share what I was given. This is me here sharing now with you. So what I want you to do is I want you also to share your stories. I do, because your stories are as valuable as mine. Our stories are valuable. Now, this whole idea of the storytelling, where did that come from? Well, when I came of age, one of my very first trips, and I've taken many, but one of my very first trips to Africa was to Senegal. And when I went to Senegal, I lived there for a little while, and I had an experience. I had a great experience there that helped me to grow into becoming a storyteller. In Dakar, in Senegal, is where I discovered the craft of Jaliyaa, which made me travel throughout West Africa to other parts of Africa, Mali, Guinea, Gambia, to learn this craft. It became almost an obsession for me to learn more and more about this craft because I saw the craft of Jaliyaa, this oral tradition, as something of value for our children in this country, something that could contribute to their growth. Now, if you want to know more about that journey, I wrote a book about it. The book is titled Road of Ash and Dust, Awakening of a Soul in Africa. And there is so much in that book. But the thing that is important for me about the book and sharing it with you is that throughout the book, there is constant growth for me. I had a ton of King Lion moments throughout that book, and you can find it almost anywhere. It's on Amazon, Barnes and Noble. So if you're interested in knowing more about Baba and how I became the storyteller I am, check out the book if you get an opportunity. Oh, but also, if you happen to be one of those people who reads the book, please reach out to me. Please share with me your thoughts on the book, your experience in reading the book. Authors, they love people reading their books, but even more, authors love people giving them feedback on their books. So if you do happen to read the book, Road of Ash and Dust, Awakening of a Soul in Africa, please reach out to me and let me know what you think about that book. And my closing thought is this. Griots, I've talked about previously, were the oral historians, the living, breathing libraries of their people. And remember the saying, when a griot dies, it is as if an entire library has burned to the ground. In their societies in West Africa, in the ancient times, the griots were the glue that held the society together. They were the thread that brought all the fabric together through their words, through their knowledge, because everything was passed from mouth to ear. So their stories had immense value, immense value. Now, you might be thinking we don't have griots in our society. Oh, but I beg to differ. We do. Now you're saying, where are our griots? You are a griot. We all are griots. When we make the conscious decision to share our words, our stories, we are building, through our actions of sharing, we are building community. Because getting to know one another, it tears down those defensive walls. You cannot get to know another human being's story intimately and not bring love into the equation. That's the value of our stories. So you are a griot, whether you are 3 or 103. If you hear a story, share a story. If it resonates with you, if you feel something in it, when you share the story, others will feel what you felt. That's the thought I want to leave you with. And, as always, you know what's coming, don't you? Until our paths cross again, Doni Doni, Kunoni Be Yagada.